Welcome to my podcast story, the show where podcasters share the real journey behind their voices, from their first mic check to their biggest milestones. Every episode reveals the lessons, challenges, and breakthrough that shape a podcast star's journey. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I can't wait for you to hear today's story. In today's episode of my podcast story, we have Pete A. Turner, the executive producer and host of the Break It Down show. Pete's podcast has become a powerhouse platform featuring conversations with an extraordinary range of guests, from Nobel Prize winners and Medal of Honor recipients to Grammy winners whose music has sold over 1.7 billion records. What makes Pete's podcasting journey fascinating is his background as a combat spy who spent over 70 months in war zones, conducting more than 1,000 missions outside the wire in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. His unique experience in counterintelligence has shaped his interviewing style, allowing him to break down complex topics with the precision of someone who's had to analyze critical information in life or death situations. He's here to share how he transformed from gathering intelligence in combat zones to producing over 1,300 episodes, creating what he calls a collection of perspectives that can't be found anywhere else in media. His story is one of reinvention, purpose, and using his unique lens to change how we understand modern conflict and human resilience. Tell us your name and what you do.
Hi, I'm Pete A. Turner, and I am an executive producer. I run podcasts, I produce podcasts, and it's like I'm going to become a movie producer here as well. So I do a bunch of things. Thank you.
Welcome to my podcast story.
Yeah, thank you.
What's the name of your podcast? And
My show is called The Break It Down Show.
The Break It Down?
Yeah, Break It Down Show. Yep, that's
Okay.
what it is.
What's the show about?
It's about anything. It can be about war. It can be about espionage. It can be about baseball. Tomorrow night I'll have a show about baseball. I posted a show about a community event today. It's about life, man. It's about interesting people doing fascinating things.
Break It Down Show. When did you start the podcast?
Well, I came back from being in combat, and I was tired of doing that. And I had done a lot of incredible things. So I thought, I should tell some of these stories of my experiences of being out and about and doing things. So I started going to my friend's show. He had a radio show, just a small radio show, nothing big. But we found out that we really liked doing this together. And so we kept doing it. And then we didn't get fired so much as they said, hey, go do something bigger. This is small time little radio. Go dream it up and get big. And so we did. And that's how we got started. And that was over 10 years ago.
Oh, this podcast is 10 years, like over 10 years old.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That's a long time.
2,000 episodes and 10 years. Lots of work.
Wow. 10 years. Okay.
10 years. Yeah.
When you started the podcast, what were you seeking to get out of the podcast or to do with the podcast?
We thought we might make some money and meet some really cool comedians. That was sort of like the original plan. Like people would use our link on Amazon to buy things.
Yeah.
And we would get a little bit of money from that and maybe have an audience. And some of that happened. We met a lot of great comedians. We met a lot of wonderful people, but people didn't really click on our Amazon link. And the amount of people you need to click on your Amazon link is a lot more. My show did really well for a long time. It was booming for a long, long, long time. But even then, you need a lot of people to click on a link to get paid 2 pennies, a day or something. All of a sudden, you're like, man, I'm working awful hard on this Amazon thing and it's not paying off. So yeah, that was the original idea, was to meet a bunch of really cool people that we liked, and comedians and et cetera, actors, musicians. And all of that happened, but the money part was harder to figure out. But this is 10 plus years ago, so it was a different game back.
Before podcasting, what was your journey like, both personally and professionally?
I worked in places like Iraq and Afghanistan doing espionage work. I was a spy, so I would go into town and I would talk to people about whatever was going on wherever the Americans were with me. And so me and an interpreter would go out and yeah, we would try to figure out what needed to be figured out so that we could help our side do a little better. That was what I did professionally.
Oh, okay. The name of the show is the Break It Down podcast.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Is there a story behind the name of the podcast? Like, how did the name just come about?
Yeah, the Break It Down Show. Let me think about this. So John and I, who started the show, he was the one I joined him on his radio show. we were trying to figure out what to call this thing, and he and I would have these long conversations while we were working at the time we were a little 2-man handyman team, and we go around all over the San Francisco Bay Area fixing things and painting stuff. And it was sort of just this moment after like throwing around ideas and not quite finding it. One of us, and I think it was me, said, what if we just called it the Break It Down Show? And I know exactly what part of town we're in. We were making a left turn. And he's like, you know what? That's pretty cool.
A eureka moment.
Yeah, it was. And John's a musician. So he's like, yeah, like a breakdown of the song or how to explain things. And it just fit a lot of the things that we talked about. And so that's why it became the Break It Down Show. And we've been tickled with how great that name has remained, because there's so many times in the show where someone has said, let me break this down for you. And they don't mean to be funny. And then they realize they're like, like the show.
Yeah.
And so the name it's really worked out great. It really has.
Wow. For me, it's the fact that the show started before. Wait. This is the question now. Before the name, the Break It Down Show, what was the name that was being in? Because from what you're saying so far, it sounds like the show was already going on before the eureka moment of the Break It Down Show.
Yeah, the radio show was called the Midweek Mash, and it was on Wednesdays.
Midweek.
And so, the Midweek Mash. And so we would play songs, we would talk and that kind of thing. And it was we had a great time. We started bringing in guests, and it for sure is an early version of what the Break It Down Show became. But Break It Down Show became its own thing for sure shortly after that. Like we started with that idea and then we grew it into something bigger, and amazing. But there are some old episodes of the Midweek Mash that we have recorded in somewhere on some hard drive, and I'm sure they aren't all that great, but you got to start somewhere to get to where we're at. And we just had a blast doing it. We would have so much fun. Then we would go out and eat dinner afterwards. And it was just such a great moment in both of our lives as we accomplished a lot of things within our lives. And the radio show was a big part of it. And then when we had to leave to do the bigger things, the Break It Down Show thing, just for whatever reason for us, it clicked, it clicked.
I think your story goes on to show that sometimes you just have to start not knowing, because a lot of people are like, I want to start a podcast, but I don't have the perfect name yet. And I'm like, just start it. And
names
when you
don't
have
matter.
the perfect
I'll tell you
name,
right now, it's nothing. Your show doesn't become anything until you make it into something. So if you called your show Scooby Dooby Hooby Booby, that's fine. It doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that you do it, that you create something. And if you can't do it, who cares what you called it? Like if you fail 5 shows in, you never do it. Why did you work so hard on the name? Work hard on showing up every day. Like, look, you've got more than one show, right? So you know how this goes. You have to do the work. Whatever you call your show, it's really secondary. Yeah, you can always change the name too. That's the other thing. Call it something else,
It'll be fun if someone would start a show called the Scooby Dooby Who. If I see a show like that, I'm like, what are the odds? I'm like, wow.
What are the odds?
If someone is listening that has a show called that, please reach out to me. I'd love to interview you.
Please do.
Okay. At the early days of the podcast, what was the what would you say were the biggest challenge you and John faced?
Well, there are a lot of challenges. So it's sort of like, which barrier do I want to discuss? There were so many of them. We weren't sure what the show was for a long time, and we disagreed a lot on what the show was. And John doesn't really do the show with me anymore, but he did host an episode of it this week. Yesterday, or actually today's show was hosted by him, right? So he's absolutely part of it, but he has moved on to other things, and he still founded this incredible show. But what he does now is he works in construction and he runs projects, and he's great at that. And he plays the drums in a bunch of bands. And so his passion is in music. He got that back through our show, though, which is amazing. Oh. I mean, the story of his comeback into music has been marvelous, and the fact that it came from this show. So, the biggest barrier probably was just sorting out, how do we not keep going, but how do we justify keeping going? Because the money thing still is not resolved. Like we bring money in. I should say, I bring money in. right? But
Yeah.
it's not enough to say, man, I should keep doing this, right? Like, if anything, I should stop and do something else that makes a lot more money.
Yeah.
But the rewards from the show have turned into things that are very valuable to me. And so I do keep going. And I figured out new ways to live and ways to create value within my shows. Figuring out that value proposition is probably the biggest barrier that we had to go through. Ask me again in 5 minutes, I'll probably give you a different answer. But the money thing's a real thing, to
Yeah.
find what you're willing to do and how much you can get compensated for it. It's not easy to figure that out.
Yeah, in a while I will get to the money aspect. But for the value proposition, the timeline of things, when did you and John figure that out, and how did you get to define clearly what the podcast was about? Like, oh yeah, this is definitely what the podcast is about.
We figured out what the podcast was about pretty early. We had a bunch of great connections that we could book, and then I figured out how to book people. And so I just started booking people across the wide variety of things. If I saw something interesting in the news, I would get a hold of that person and they would come on the show. But also I would try to blow John's mind. And so we've talked to some incredible musicians, just, world famous people. And I just wanted to blow his mind as often as possible with the show. So he's like, I cannot believe we are talking to so-and-so, and gosh, that was such a fun thing to be able to do. So the show has always sort of been about interesting people doing fascinating things. That's the design. And then we bring them in, whether we're talking about geopolitics or poetry, it's wide on purpose because I'm not a big believer in niching. It's fine to niche in a certain, I'm not saying niching is always bad, but if you niche into a small little hole, it's hard to navigate that hole without getting repetitive and bored, and
Yeah,
life to me is bigger than that. So when we designed the show, that was one of the big things is let's get to meet our heroes. Let's get to meet incredible comedians. Let's get to meet these people. And then the other thing we did, and I think you appreciate this, is I figured out how to put us on the road so I can go to their house. So we don't always do this, but I'll go to someone else's house and record the show there. And now I'm their guest while they're a guest on my show. And like, imagine if I came all the way to Africa. You said Nigeria is where you're from, right? If I came all the way to your house, how would you treat me if I came there to put you on my show? Like, you would walk
Whoa.
me all over the place and you would
That
show
would
me
be
everything,
that would be
right?
will be a networking in the guise of a podcast episode.
Yeah, I've done walking episodes, by the way. I put the recording gear in my backpack and we walked around down in Santa Monica. Santa Monica's on the beach and it's gorgeous. And so I just did a walking show one time. And it was
Oh,
amazing to think about what you can do if you don't bind yourself to a studio, or what you can do if I hosted you on my show and I brought in a person who would create a positive dynamic in the conversation. And so I'll bring other people in and have two people talk to each other, to make the conversation more interesting. And so the show has just become this thing where you never know what you're going to get. And that's by design. And I rely on the audience to go with me on these jumps. Like when we do these things, and they're not going to be for everybody, and that's fine, but they're all fascinating to me. And if it's fascinating to me, then I'm going to keep doing it. And if I keep doing it, I'll keep getting rewards. And it's sort
yeah,
of this self-fulfilling prophecy that, the show continues to bring value, not always money directly, although some, but it creates a lot of value in the world. And I'm glad to keep doing that.
yeah. One of the big challenges you mentioned so far is at the very beginning, it was hard to get a return on investment in terms of money, right? Have you figured that part? Have you figured that part? And
Yeah.
what's it like now?
I've spent a lot of money trying to figure out what to do with the show. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars over 10 years, right? I've bought ads, I've bought coaches, I've bought PR, I've bought everything. And what I figured is I need to spend, if I'm going to spend money, I know where I'm going to spend money, right? I know now, but I stopped doing things that didn't matter. I stopped doing things that took resources away from me, because you only get so much time and you only have so much money. And so I'll be told by all kinds of people how to make my show bigger. And then I look at their show and I'm like, I mean, my show's as big as your show. What am I going to learn from you? Like, I've not found anybody that can tell me all of the keys to the game, because I've done them all. I've tried them all. I've tried them, left them, come back, left them again. And what I know is that if I can reduce the cost of my show, if I can outproduce my peers and put out more content, and if I can meet incredible people, I'm just going to find value. Other shows can be successful too without doing this, but for what I do, I'm just going to outwork my problems, which a lot of these things I've outworked now, right? And so those problems aren't there anymore. But early on, I didn't know any of that. I was so precious with so many things that didn't matter. And as I've cut those things off, there's less demand on my time, less demand on my money, because I'm less precious with things that I thought mattered that simply didn't matter.
Yeah, okay. You gave a lot of advice and tips there. So I'll just love for you to break them down. First, does the podcast make money currently?
Yeah. It makes a little bit of money. Yeah. Not a lot,
How?
but it's it creates revenue in other ways too, though. Like earlier today, I
Okay.
got a text about a deal that might go through, right? That's because of my show. And it's not direct money, but if I get that money, I'm definitely going to spend it. I'm definitely going to
Yeah.
take it, And so, yeah, like I thought I might sell courses, and it turned out I didn't want to do that. And so I didn't do it. I thought I might sell ads, and I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to go out and pitch ads and get paid $25 a month. Like for me, I'm like, I'll just go do something else to make money. Like if I'm going to work that hard at making $25, why don't I work on another aspect of the show and try to create value that way? And so I just stopped doing the things that didn't drive value. And a lot of times that was to my financial detriment, maybe, but also I focused on where the money is. Like me getting into movies is because of my show, and because I didn't worry about things like keywords and stuff that took a lot of my time away. I just focused on the show and meeting people, and that turned into the opportunity where like, hey, do you know so-and-so and such? Or, hey, Pete, do you have any stories like this? And then all of a sudden I had the answers to those questions. And so I just continue to develop that value.
Yeah. I think the podcast has given you leverage that's without that you probably wouldn't have had.
Yeah. Leverage for sure. Leverage and access. Yeah. Because I can say legitimately like, the musicians on my show, they've sold over 1.7 billion records. Well, that's access. Someone who's a musician is going to say, well, yeah, I belong on that show. Because they do. We've had award winners from all kinds of fields. And so when I list the award winners, it's all the awards. It's all of them. All the big awards, whether it's world titles or gold medal, whatever it's going to be, all of the awards, right? And so so I get access because I've done this work to say, hey, I'm a place that you can go to. And then when I talk to the people I'm talking to, they're trying to sort the same things out. Maybe they're making more money than I do, but I'm a resource because I'm broad, and I'm like, I can introduce you to so-and-so. Maybe you guys will have some kind of connection. And that also creates value. And so someone will, every now and then, right? Not often, but often enough, someone will say, Pete, you connected me to so-and-so, and that worked out. I wanted to send you a little money. How do I do that? And so then I tell them how to send me money. And then I look down and I'm like, holy cow, they sent me a bunch of money because they appreciate the connection, right? And so even my network has value, and that all comes from my show. And so I sort of don't worry about what the show does because I know on faith that it's going to create value for me. And so I just have learned to accept that and not measure it, not get too crazy about it, not try to speed it up, but just continue to do it. And it just reliably creates, not every opportunity happens. Sometimes they fall apart, but nobody's mad at me about it. They're like, yeah, that didn't work out. Next time we have something, we're definitely going to come back to you, And so I become someone people think about when they try to solve a problem or when they need to meet somebody. Yeah. And that's because of my ridiculous show. So yeah, there's money there. There's a lot of value. And I wouldn't change a thing about that.
Yeah. While you were explaining, the first time when I asked you about what's the state of monetization for the podcast, you mentioned three things. You said, if I can just reduce my expenses, make more episodes than my peers, and meet incredible persons, that you'll be doing well. I'm curious on the aspect of reducing the expenses. What are the expenses you're incurring for the podcast currently? What tools are you paying for? Where's the budget going to for the podcast?
Yeah. I spend money on X because I think X is valuable. I'm not sure of that, and I'm glad to cut it off at any time. Like I try things out.
Yeah.
And so I think it helps. I think. I'm not convinced. I spend money on StreamYard, which is a program kind of like Riverside.
Yeah.
And there's money there. Occasionally I'll run ads, not too often. Let's say I run ads, I don't know, 2 out of the 12 months I'll run ads, because I want to promote something, or somebody will say, hey, can you help me out with my book? And I want to help them. So I'll run an ad. So it's good for them. It's good for me. So I'll do that
Yeah.
sometimes. Those are the primary areas, man, where I spend money. Now, I might spend money on a PR thing. Like, let's say that you have a really hyper engaged audience, and I say,
Yeah.
hey, I'd love to get some access to your audience. Will you let me pay you some money and have me on a couple of times? And then that person usually says,
Quick break. Before we continue, I'd love to invite you to join the My Podcast Story newsletter. Each week, I share highlights from our guest stories, behind the scenes podcasting tips, and resources to help you grow your own show. You can sign up at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. Now, let's get back to the episode.
yeah, I'd love to do that. I see your work, Pete.
Yeah.
You're doing a good job. And so I'll give them, I don't know, a small amount of money, because I'm not offering much and they're not asking much. And so I'll give them a reasonable amount of money, and then they will expose me to their audience, and they'll promote me in a way that ads don't work. And so that kind of PR angle helps. Just, it puts energy into the show. Does it create a lot of followers? I don't know, but it does create energy in the show. And so I spend money on that. Other than that, I don't spend a lot of money. I used to pay a guy in the former Yugoslavian states. So he lived in North Macedonia, and he produced all my episodes. And I just realized that I love this dude, right? But it wasn't creating any movement in the show. I was just spending money to not do that. And then I tried publishing them myself, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Because the podcast channels themselves, for me and what I do, that's at an expense of time and money. So I spend $5 to maintain my catalog where it is. That's it, $5 a month. But other than that, I don't see the value in investing in that, because Apple Podcast is not a good partner. I spend money on Podmatch. That's where we met, right? I spend money there.
Yeah.
And I find
yeah.
that valuable too, because I have the ability to get a steady flow of guests if I want to book for my show, which I primarily don't do, but it also gets me on things. And I think that helps. And Podmatch is great because of the way the San Filippo's set it up. You can make a little bit of money back if you're the right kind of tiered member. So yeah, I have value there. But other than that, man, like by not publishing on podcast channel, that's sort of like, wait, what are you doing? But here's what I figured out is that audience that joins there. Yeah, there's a lot of them, but they don't do anything. They don't buy books that I can tell. I can't measure them. I don't know who they are. And so I'm just like, hey, I'm over on YouTube. You want to come see me? Come over to YouTube. And if you want to subscribe, great. If you don't, great. But that's how I handle that is just make my machine sleek, make it elegant, add things to it, take them off, try it again. How do I make the show better? What equipment do I need? But I don't spend a lot of money on any of it, because I want the show to earn that money. The show has to earn that innovation. And right now where my show is at, it's at a good spot where it doesn't need a lot of attention. And then at some point I'll say, oh man, I need to invest in this or that. And then I'll do it. But that's it. I don't spend a lot of money on new equipment. I use equipment until it wears out. And then, I'll buy a backup, so that if it wears out, I'm like, oh, new cable, but other than that, I don't spend a bunch of money on gadgets. I try to be lean on everything and make the show earn its way to more money.
Well, you've pretty much walked us through your behind the scenes tools. Well, what's the flow of an episode from idea to eventually getting published?
Well, my show books itself a lot. So that's the first thing to say. Because I have had a lot of success, PR people will get a hold of me. Pete, I've got so-and-so coming up. Hey, great. Let's find dates. And then we find dates and we book it. So there's that. There are my friends that have been on the show before, and they're like, hey, Pete, I've got a new book coming out. Can I come on the show? And so they book themselves, and we find a date and time. There's that kind of thing. So, and then there's people that I reach out to on my own, or people that I tickle and say, hey, come back on the show, right? So I'm always looking for guests and hunting for them. because I want to continue to expand the show, continue to enrich my relationships with the people that already come on the show. So that's sort of the pre-production booking side of things. After that, let's say I get a book from somebody. Have I got here's a book right here. There's a book I got from a guy, The Bootlegger's Wife, right? Or Bride.
Yeah.
So when this guy writes a new book, right, his name is Rick. When Rick comes back on the show, I will have read this book, and the next time he writes a book, he'll send it to me and I'll read it again. So there's some of that kind of thing where I'm familiar with what they do. And so I get an idea. There's a lot of that. I don't know. If there's a movie that I'm going to talk about, I'll watch the movie. And sometimes I do nothing. Sometimes I just don't need to do anything. I know who the guest is, or I'm just too busy. And I just, as if I meet the person at a pub, I just sit down and I talk to them, and we have these wonderful conversations. So that's the pre-production part. And then in production, it's pretty simple. Just I turn on StreamYard and I've sent out a couple of emails ahead of time. I text a lot because I find texting kind of locks people in. Hey, where are you? Like, oh, I'm coming, kind of thing. So I communicate with 2 channels, really 3, because the phone, sometimes we talk on the phone, but primarily text, primarily email, then phone. And that gets most of my work done. And then once I hit stop on the show, I try to do no post-production at all. The only thing I do in post is I'll run my show on StreamYard. They have an AI robot that will chop up clips for you. And so I just I push yes, publish. I populate which accounts I want it to publish to, and then I send the damn thing. I don't think about it. I don't worry about it because it doesn't matter. It's not worth my time to worry about it. And that's the only thing I do post-production, is to do that. I'll also send a little letter to the person and say, hey, thanks, come on anytime you want, whatever it is, right? But that's it. That's I try not to do too much extra work because the value's not there. It's just me working for nothing. Like telling people to, here's one thing, I never say, click to subscribe, right? Like maybe now and then I'll say it, but like 1 in 50 shows, I'll say something like that, because everybody knows. Like, it's not like people have forgotten to subscribe. Either they will or they won't, and I trust the audience to know what they like, and reliably they click on things, whether I say anything or not. I don't spend a lot of time populating fields with all of my links and all of my subscription things that I want people to do, because people don't look into the show comments and click on those things. I see the numbers and I'm like, why am I doing that? Why am I spending however many minutes it is to populate that on YouTube? Automated, fine, whatever, but no one clicks on those things. And so I don't spend time on that. Why would I waste my valuable words saying like and subscribe when I could say, hey, I like you. Call up the phone. Hey, man, how are you doing? Check in on somebody. Hey, lady, how are you? I'd rather do that because that's more personal than just assuming somebody's going to click on a link that I never even mentioned, or if I do mention, who cares? So I don't do those things. And so that's my workflow. Is I do a lot of emailing, a lot of calling, a lot of talking to folks on the phone, and I just constantly work at that so there's always a flow of people coming onto the show.
Oh, thank you for showing us the behind the scenes of how your podcast episodes get made.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for asking. Was that seem crazy to you, some of that stuff, or what do you think?
No, it's, one of the things I realized that podcasting, it's a game of trade-off, right? So the question is, what are you willing to trade off, right? You're like, you see certain persons, they are not on social media. Their podcast is not on social media, and you're like, oh, why are you supposed to be doing social media? There's a lot of rich, and they tell you like, no, at that time, there's scarce resources, scarce time, scarce amount of money. So you have to ask yourself, what's the most like I could spend this on, and just go all in on that. And so getting to see that you are adopting that same mindset is really goes on to show that that's very important. A lot of persons might decide to say, okay, that's those things you said, oh, those things are not important. It's important to them, or that's them. So, but they have to sacrifice something. That's just basically the whole idea.
Yeah. Another thing that I think deeply about this is, how do I use my podcast to help somebody else? Like, let's say I'm talking to one of my friends and they hold up a book, and they hold up Rick's book, and they're like, I read this book. It was incredible. And I'll say, who wrote it? Oh, it's Rick Swicott. Oh, okay. Well, let me get him on the show. And they're like, you can do that? And I'm like, yeah, probably. And so I get him on the show. Then I'm like, hey, you know how you read Rick's book and you loved it? He's going to be on the show on Tuesday. Why don't you sit in and be a guest host? And then their mind is blown. That's good for Rick. That's good for my friend. Obviously good for me, good for the audience. It's a powerful thing. Or if I've got a client and I've got a couple clients, I bring them on the show and I let them be themselves on my show. Maybe they're a podcast client, so I'm helping them out, right? So they have their own show they're trying to create. Well, come on my show, and I'm not going to make them a big act, right? But I'm going to give them the ability to see how these things work, and I'm going to be able to, talk them up. And I don't take anybody on who I don't believe in. So like if I'm talking
Yeah.
about somebody, it's because I believe in them, and so I do that. Or I'll say to them, "Who's your dream client that you want on?" They're like, "Gosh, I'd love to get so-and-so or this company." And I'm like, "Let's get somebody from there. Do you want to book them?
Yeah.
You want me to book them?" And then they'll go, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to book them for your show. And so they'll book someone on my show. And now this sales thing has happened a little bit. They haven't done anything. It's all easy. It's all cold. It's like, there's no harm in this. And so they get to talk about something they're passionate about. And then maybe they go down the road and have a deal. By the way, that's when a lot of times someone comes back and they shove some money in my pocket. And they're like,
Yeah.
"You introduced me to so-and-so and it was great for us. Thank you. Here's a little bit of a thank you money, And so I think about this all the time. How can I create value with my show for somebody else? And I don't think this is a common thought, and I encourage anybody who's watching, who's trying to understand podcasting. Why is your show valuable? Why does anybody need to watch your show? Is it because you're interesting? Okay, great. Do better than that. Dig deeper and find where the value is so that you can say, I have this wonderful machine. Mine's a great networking machine. So who do you want to meet? I want to meet so-and-so. Great. Let's do that. And then we try, and
Yeah.
I try to get that person on the show. And then, hey, if nothing else, I now know that person. And so that's the thing, is where do you find value and how do you exchange that value to somebody else so that they have a chance to do something special? I got one of my longtime friends a gig with another longtime friend because I know these guys and I've networked them together. Even though we all grew up together, they weren't friends, other than we grew up together, right? And I caught them together. We had dinner, and now they both are making money because of that dinner. And
Yeah.
it's an incredible thing. That's not directly from my show, but I learned that by going and doing my show. So that value extended out from my show, and I knew to put these guys together because of who they are and who I am. And now they both have work for the time being. That'll change at some point, but I'm always trying to find ways to extend value to someone else.
Wow. What's one story or piece of feedback you've gotten from the listener that's deeply impacted you?
Piece of feedback. These coincidences happen quite often when you have a show. And I was having this wonderful conversation, a high-end political kind of foreign policy kind of conversation with a guy. And I just think the world of him. And I met him at a conference that I spoke at, because sometimes I do some academic work. And so he's like, "Your stuff is great." And so I'm like, "Okay, great." And so I had him on the show, and I had him on the show, and I had him on the show. And we became very friendly. And so then through another person, I met another guy who was kind of like this guy, but one was a Republican and one was a Democrat. And so I'm talking to the Republican guy, and I'm like, "Man, this is great. Talking to you reminds me so much of this guy that I know who also lives in Washington, D.C. And he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's interesting." I'm like, "I'd love to have you guys on because you're both kind of from the same era. And you probably think, although you have different approaches, you think the same way about the world." And he's like, "That sounds great. I'd love to do that with you. What's the guy's name?" And I said, "His name is Robert Hunter." And he goes, "That guy lives right behind me. That's his house right there."
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
So these
wow.
guys are they're across the street neighbors. And so I've had them on the show a bunch of times, and they became friends. And they started taking walks together. And one of the shows, the last time I had them on the show together, right now they're kind of cross because of Donald Trump, but the one guy said, "Pete, before we get started, you got to know this. We've become great friends. We have these conversations. They're wonderful. You've really enriched our lives. Thank you for doing that." That kind of feedback, man, that tells you that there's so many wins that I don't even know about because they haven't taken the time to say thanks or whatever it is. But because I'm able to do these crazy things, it creates value, more value than I can realize. And so I now know with confidence that I can do this. I can create value for people that they will enjoy and they'll enrich their lives. If it's 2 people a year, that's enough, right? But I think it's more than that because there's a lot more people paying attention, a lot more people that watch the shorts, and a lot more people that do that. And if I get someone to take a step forward and create something or relate to somebody in a positive way or whatever it is, well, then Yeah, I'll take all of those blind wins I can get. I don't need to know what the payoff is because I think I'm making the world a tiny bit better of a place.
At the beginning of the episode, you one of the things while you're introducing yourself, you mentioned you're a podcast producer. So I'm curious, when did you? Oh, are you when you wait? Okay, when you say podcast producer, what that means to me is, oh, I produce podcasts for people. Now, of course, if you produce podcasts for your own show, you could also be a podcast producer. What do you mean by you're a podcast producer, and
Yeah.
when did you become a podcast producer?
Yeah. Yeah. And what part of production am I producing? Right. Yeah. So
Exactly.
you're right. Like I've not said anything when I said that because there's so many things it could be. So I have clients that have podcasts or they want to be on podcasts, and I help them to understand what it is to do that. And because they're too professional to have to learn it on the job. And so they hire me for my expertise. And when you hire me, I'll say something like that. And you get this, right? Like the person who wants a show, they're telling me about the name of their show. They're telling me what, I don't care about any of that. I'm going to put a show out for you. Production's not going to be why you fail. Because as long as you're ready to work, I'm going to put this show out. You can decide what you want to call it. You can decide what it's going to be. I'm glad to help you along the way, but we're going to make this thing. It's really going to happen. And so I get them moving in a way forward. I get them thinking about, why are you doing this? And do you need it? I try to talk them out of it. I try to talk everybody out of doing it. You understand that nobody's going to listen. You understand that no money is coming. And if these things happen, it's a miracle. You understand that it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be expensive. I'm not going to charge you a lot of money, but you're going to get sick of paying me at some point. And you have to figure out how and why you're doing that. So do you really want to do this? And I've had people say, you know what, Pete, you're right. I don't want to do it. You're right. I fell in love with the idea. I don't have time for this. And I don't mind paying you, but I don't have time for this. And I'd rather not pay you if I don't have time to do this. And so that's the first thing I do is I try to talk them out of doing it because they maybe don't need to. And no one's had the guts to tell them your ideas doesn't matter. What matters is, do you have time and money to make this show happen? And man, what it takes to do this stuff, right? If you're a parent and you're a business owner and now you want to add a podcast that's going to cost you, I don't know, a couple $1,000s a month or whatever it is, you don't have any time, don't do a podcast. Go do something else. Go spend time with your family. Go work out, but don't do a podcast because you don't have time or money for it.
Yeah. Yes. The reason I'm just laughing and smiling is, sometimes you stare at the wall and especially when it's time for editing and all that. The recording part is fun, having conversation. That's the sweet part. But then recording, asking yourself, okay, what should be the premise of the show? How do I put things in order? How do I show up next month? And then in the month after that month, and you're like, I signed up for this.
Yeah. Well, like, look how much time and not how much you spend on Podmatch. And it took me a long time to get, I love the San Filipos. I want to talk to those guys. I want to work with them. I want to figure things out. Right. But it took me over a year to figure out how to put their program, Podmatch, into my life where I can sit down and now I use it for my clients because I know it's valuable, but it took me a long time to crack the code and talking to Alex and everything else. It was hard. It wasn't easy. But now that I have the flow of it, that right there, I don't know, do I spend 10 hours a week on Podmatch? Probably, and then I spend however many hours doing the shows on top of that. And I love this. This is great. Like you and I talking helps me understand better what I'm trying to do. And there's this huge return on it. So that's like, yes, we're podcasting, but people don't realize the thing that we're doing right now is investing in how well our show does. You have me on, we're exchanging ideas, but you're going to get inspired with an idea. Maybe you're going to approach Podmatch differently, whatever. All these things come out of that. If you don't have time for this kind of thing, then do something else. Do whatever you have time for. Spend the money where you have time to spend the money and you can put the work in because podcasting, it's not gentle. It's wonderful. It'll change your life if you can. I always liken it's like a martial art or swimming. If you want to become a great swimmer, you're just going to have to swim. And if you don't have time to swim, you're not going to become a great swimmer. And so same thing, martial art, like you want to become a black belt, you're going to have to go all the time and get your head kicked in and work out afterwards and stretch and recover and all these things that are not in the dojo. Same thing, man. This is our dojo right now. And you and I are working on our craft and we're getting better at it. If you don't have time to do this, then don't. Find the thing that you have time to do, and pour your heart and love into that, because that's what you should do. And if it's podcasting, great. You'll have a great time, and it'll pay off. It just takes a minute. You got to get through you got to get through all the barriers that we talked about earlier.
In the timeline of, you've been doing the podcast for over 10 years, and in the timeline of that,
Yeah.
when would you say you started producing podcasts?
I started doing podcast production pretty early on, because people were like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, well, I'll show you, but that costs money, and then right around the pandemic, it was really taken off. And then the pandemic started and it killed that business. But I was getting hired to go places and do clinics and stuff. And it was decent money. I was going to be away from the house more than I wanted to, but decent money is a good trade-off. So I was starting to do that, but then that business kind of died down. And then a lot of people got into podcasting, and I kind of backed away from the production side for a while, because it breaks my heart when someone fails at podcasting after they're so excited and I believe in them. And so I had to try to think up what I was willing to do. And I think I've got a better method now. So I've done it the whole time, but I've gotten better and better at it, because you can't compel somebody to do something they don't want to do. And so that's why I push so hard on, you probably should quit. And then if they're like, no, I really want to do that, I'm like, you understand that almost all these shows fail, and you're going to spend money on this. And they're like, I get it. And I understand what you're saying. I still want you to help me. All right. Well, then now we move forward, because now they understand that there's all these stuff they have to do. And I want to do it their way. They want to do it. I'm going to give them my idea. But yeah, so I've produced, I don't know, probably 8 of those 10 plus years. I've produced some kind of podcast for somebody. And so I've produced, I don't know, maybe another 800 episodes for other folks, in addition to my own 2,000. So yeah, I've done a lot of it, but it's a different kind of work, because I've got to figure out what those folks need individually, and how do I help them, and how do I grow with them? Because it's hard to figure out where the value is in somebody else's show, especially if they're learning it while I'm learning it. It's difficult to do.
You do podcast production, and you get a lot of ideas, and you see perspective from working with clients, plus working on your own show. One of the core things you mentioned is you are going to outproduce your peers in your industry or niche. I did not really ask you, like, what was the frequency and the cadence of episodes you publish for your podcast?
I'm basically daily, five shows a week. Yeah. And
Okay.
sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. Right now I'm going through kind of a recovery time where I'm backing off a little bit, because I was getting a little bit burned out. And so I'm a little less prolific with the production, which might sound like, oh, Pete's getting lazy, but it's not. I'm relaxing a little bit, because I'd done a lot of stuff this summer, and look, the show's going to be fine. I've learned this, right? The show works, and all I've got to do is send out a couple of emails. If I wanted to, I'd go on a Podmatch right now and I could fill my calendar. It's not a problem, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about that. And so to avoid that burnout, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to back off for a little bit. And when I need to get more shows, I'll book them, because I know how to do it, right? I'm not in any way worried about that. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of backed off for a little bit, and that's what I'm doing. And by backed off, I mean, I'm still doing multiple shows a week, It's not like I'm not working.
Yeah. It's good you said that, because the question I was about to ask you is how you deal with burnout, consistency, and creative block. And so from what you just said so far, is that it's important once in a while to take breaks, right? 1 week break just to recharge and, be back on track.
Yeah. And I tend to take, because I took a lot of, and when I say a lot, I mean, I work the whole time. So let's understand that. But when I slow down and stop, I slow down and I stop, and I don't do it. So I might take a long weekend. And I might just do 3 shows a week for a while, and just use those extra days to do other things. I'm still filling my pipeline with things. It's just, I'm just changing the nature of the work that I'm doing. And that variety for me helps reduce burnout. And so when I do feel like, oh man, like tomorrow I'm going to do a show at 7 at night, but I love baseball. And so I want to talk about baseball. So that's the only show I'm going to do tomorrow is that show on my show. Right. And that's all right. I like talking baseball. I don't care if the baseball episodes do anything or go anywhere. I just want to talk baseball with smart people. And that for me is a way of also dealing with my burnout. Like, I don't have to just talk about war. talk about war a lot on my show, and we'll talk more about war. But yeah, sometimes baseball, sometimes just talking to somebody else who has a very interesting point of view on something, and that's the whole thing with all of this, whether it's producing or my own production, that cadence, the richness, all of those things are managing that and understanding when you start to feel full. That's how you manage all this stuff, but you have to feel it first so that like, oh, I'm getting a little tired of this. Let me see what it feels like to take some time off. Then I take a little bit of time off. I do a little less work per week, and I go, okay, all right, that's enough of that. Now I got to get back to work because the
Yeah.
pace of work is not the problem. It's just what is the nature of the work. That's more of my problem. Where am I putting
Yeah.
my time and effort? And sometimes the show takes too much, and I'll
Yeah.
feel it. I'm like, I'm feeling worn out. Let me do something else. I hope that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Thank you for that. Um, we've talked about the behind the scenes and the origin
Yeah.
story of your podcast. I'm curious, what's your vision for the future of your podcast?
I hate to even say, because what I thought it was every single time has been something different. But I'm hoping that I'm doing movies and I'm having to figure out how to still do podcasts because as I get deeper into these movie projects, they consume more of my time. And I'm not sure what that looks like. I'm sure I will find some way to do it. And if not, I'll be doing something that's so amazing that it's replaced the podcast. That's always a possibility that I may just say,
Yeah.
and that's that for the Break It Down show, right? But what I believe will happen is when I make my movies, I'll just use that platform to help create more excitement about the movie. And so I'll have the lighting people come in, I'll have the stunt people come in, I'll do whatever. And that's what I say now. I don't know. But I want to continue to make things, and as I make bigger and bigger things, I don't see why I can't use my show to talk about those things because I could talk about anything I want to. It turns out I'm the boss of the show, so not only do I get to be creative, this guy here is also a jerk of a boss and works me to death.
Wow. Oh, that'll be exciting to see how it
Yeah, we'll
evolves.
see, man. It looks like it's happening, but every movie's a miracle. And so I
Yeah.
don't get too far ahead. Are we advancing this movie? Okay, great. Let's keep advancing. Let's keep working. How do we get to the next step? That's all I do. And I figure out how to free log jams, and sometimes log jams don't want to be freed. So you got to wait. You got to let it drift for a little bit. Then you come in there and you're like, now I can move this thing, And so,
Yeah.
yeah, man, I'm moving at the pace of other people and other people's time and energy. And so sometimes that means that I have to push hard. Other times I just have to wait. And that's not in my nature at all. And so I've been learning that part of the craft. So the show is going to go in that direction where I'm making bigger things, whether it's books, movies, and even serialized podcasts. I've tried this a couple of times, but there's more of a market for that now. And so I might be able to get into that if a couple of things line up. And so it could be that there'll be a number of ventures that I get into the next 10 years that are going to really explode things. And by the way, I want to say this too, that whole Malcolm Gladwell thing, maybe, I don't know if you know who he is, but the 10,000 hours thing, that's 10
Yeah.
years.
The
Right?
outlier.
Yeah. And sure enough, like I had to get past a lot of hours of work before I had the people lined up who I knew I could rely on and knew that they knew they could rely on me. It just takes that long in a lot of cases. And if it doesn't, consider yourself lucky and continue to work on those 10,000 hours because it's easy to be a flash in the pan. It's easy to miss the fact that, hey, I have not earned this yet, so you have to go after things hard and be as relentless as you can be without being a monster.
Oh, thank you so much, Pete. It's been an absolute delight chatting about your show and what you've been doing with your show and how you've been using that to share your message and connect with people. Where can listeners connect with you and tune into your show?
Anybody can watch it it's on Facebook, it's on X, it's on Instagram, it's on YouTube. YouTube is the place that you probably should go to though. Just type in Pete A. Turner on YouTube and you'll find me. I'm on X. You can give me Pete A. Turner. If you want to talk to me about your show, that's fine. I don't have to pitch everybody and I'm glad to give you advice, all the free advice I can. So, but if you want to do that or you want to hire me for something, that's fine. Pete at breakitdownshow.com is how you reach me. I'm glad to hear about your idea, but mostly I want to hear about why you're doing it and do you have time and do you have money to get it done? Because that's the main thing, man, is that's how the Break It Down show survived, was just time and money, work. And you can't just grind. At some point you got to polish. some point you got to, like, you've done cutting all the pieces off with the grinder. Now you got to come back and sand it smooth and paint it and make it pretty. And you can't just grind. You have to get better. You have to find elegance. That's my parting thing. You have to find elegance in what you do.
Well, thank you so much, Pete. It's been an absolute delight chatting with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I hope you enjoyed listening to this journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. And don't forget to join the newsletter at mypodcaststory.com/join for more stories and podcasting insights. Until next time, keep telling your story because someone out there needs to hear it.